Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. A little while ago I asked you guys over on Instagram to send in any questions you might have. So in this video I'm gonna go over some of those questions while you watch me paint here in the background. And there were quite a few of them, so I've tried to bunch a few together that were quite similar. But here we go. First question. What are you currently working on? I'm currently working on an animated short film about two climbers. What I'm drawing here in the background will be a shot for the film, and if you look through my back catalog of videos here on YouTube, you will find many of them being breakdowns of shots that will also go into this film. Any tips about creating from imagination, especially characters? I think creating solely from imagination is not something I would recommend. I always use reference for most things. When drawing this car here, I had loads of reference, and the same will go for characters. If you want to create your original character, I think the best way is to cherry pick things you like from a lot of good references. They can be from real people, traits from other artists' work, obviously not copying straight off, but there is nothing wrong about, taking inspiration from others' work. When putting clothes on my characters, for example, I always go online to brands that I like and use clothes that already exist. Use the expertise of the designers that have already created good design decisions, and even their work was based on references they had seen, so to create something straight out of imagination would mean sort of skipping that amazing library of collaborative creative development that is out there. I would say use references, that's my tip. So next question. I tried frame by frame animation. I want to know when you are turning a character, what do you visualize? Alright, I think the first practice when learning frame by frame animation is to learn how to draw objects in 3D space. To answer the question straight up, I visualize my character as a 3D object, and once I feel confident drawing objects rotating in 3D space, then that makes this process a lot easier and simpler. However, it takes practice to get there, and I'm still learning and improving for every new animation I make as well. What is a smart way to practice landscape and background art in general? I think the obvious thing would be to do a lot of it, but maybe make sure you paint things that inspire you so that you have a lot of fun in the process. I think having this film ahead of me is giving me a lot of variety of shots to create, where each will need its own landscape. So a personal project that they can all go into could be a good way to practice as well. Okay, the next one. How do you paint your skies? They are always great. Oh, thank you very much. I find that mixing a few close colors together creates a not so digital look, which definitely helps. Like a plain gradient can feel very clean, so I would suggest painting your gradient with a few colors rather than, for example, bucket fill it or use the perfect gradient tool as a sky. Then more recently as well, I've tried to create more graphically pleasing shapes out of my clouds. I try to make the clouds kind of help guide the eye to the focal point and so on. Okay, next one. Any tips for looking after your posture when working? Make sure to take some breaks and don't sit for too long. Absolutely do some physical exercise to not become a couch potato. Or maybe get yourself like a good chair or something. I guess that's all I can say. Are you inspired by Japanese animation? Yeah, I mean, I love Studio Ghibli's work. They're like hard to beat, I would say. I find the background art for Makoto Shinkai's film Your Name is like incredibly good as well. So they are a big inspiration for me. But I don't really watch a lot of anime otherwise. Who are some of the people that inspire your art style? I really love the work of Mateusz Urbanovic. I hope I said that name right. His YouTube channel is really great, and he shares a lot of great knowledge of his process. He worked on that film, the Your Name film that I just mentioned, and he was a background artist, so really, really cool stuff. There are obviously loads of artists with amazing work out there, so I pick inspiration from a lot of different places. But when you can see how an artist sort of works, and when they share more than just their final polished pictures, I take a lot from that. Also, Ate Gailian, I hope I said that name right too. He's another artist that I really love, and yeah, his work is really good. Do you take on gigs if you're not sure you can pull it off, as if things outside your comfort zone? I think those are two different things. I would not risk taking on a job if I was not sure I could actually pull it off. But that doesn't mean it can't be outside my comfort zone. So by working many years in the industry, I've enough experience, I would say, to know what a project will sort of require of me. Then some are more challenging than others, of course. Did you ever face breakdowns and emotional stress while working on major projects? No, not really breakdowns or stress. I mean, you can be stressed, but I can find things very challenging or maybe less interesting to work on. But then I try to find a workaround so that I'm able to keep going. Trying to look at the tasks from a new perspective often helps, and if you sort of get stuck. But I don't let emotions get involved there. If it's professional work, I have to do what's required of me, right? So if it's my personal projects, I have the luxury of actually changing things in my favor, so that makes things easier. Is Cinema 4D easy to learn? I get those questions quite a lot. I would say it's like learning everything else. It all depends on what you already know. So for someone who never touched the software, it would probably be tricky. But for someone who knows a bunch of other softwares, they might find it easy. You know, if you can play the guitar, learning to play the bass guitar might not be as steep a learning curve as if someone who's never, you know, played a string instrument before. Okay, next one. What tablet do you use? I use a Wacom Cintiq. It's the 13-inch Full HD one. Can you tell me where you can find sound effects for animation? There are some resources online like freesound.org and similar, but I tend to record a lot of sounds myself. Unless there are like really strange stuff, then I try to look for them, but if it's, you know, Foley sound, I try to make it myself. Do you use a specific color palette? No, I just go with what I think works best for each painting, really. I do use the same colors on my characters to, you know, from scene to scene so that it's consistent. But otherwise, no, nothing. It's not like I have my favorite colors or anything. Have you incorporated Illustrator into your workflow? I don't use Illustrator that much. For my personal work, I don't use it at all, but in my professional work, I get a lot of assets delivered to me in vector formats, so then I use it. If I need to animate a logo or title or something, for example, then it will always be, you know, an Illustrator file. But I don't really create much myself in Illustrator. How do you develop the patience needed for animation? Well, it's true that it's very time consuming to get a short sequence done, but I would say rather than see it from the angle of having patience to get through something, I would try to work on getting inspired to create something, as that will not make you, you know, count time, the time you spend on it in the same way. If you enjoy something, you know, time flies. Why, in your opinion, is Cinema 4D the way to go software for 3D graphics in the industry? I would say this definitely varies based on what industry you mean. In the ad industry in Europe, which is the one I'm familiar with for work, a lot of studios use Cinema 4D for their 3D work. So that's why I use it. And also, of course, I think it's great. But I can't really say for if it's a general thing. I think, you know, there are loads of different softwares for different type of work. What are the difference between Cinema 4D and other 3D apps out there? There are many good 3D softwares out there, and each will have its own place. I think for the work you see me do here on this channel, you could do this with most of the main 3D apps out there. What are the things you try to achieve in an animation for you to consider it successful? That's a good question. I think there are technical bits I can be proud of and happy I was able to sort of, you know, pull off. But for me to consider my film successful, I think it is if I were able to convey a good story. Okay, next one here. Is education overrated? I won't say so. Maybe some might be, but in general, going to a school is probably a good idea. But today you can also learn a lot by watching tutorials online and creating stuff on your own, of course. This field of work is quite different to others, I think, where we are judged mainly on what we can do, and what we can do can actually be rated in a few seconds by someone looking at our work. That in many ways is a good thing, I think, because it allows the people with talent to get the jobs, and hopefully not just based on what school you went to. But I don't know, it's a tricky question with no simple answer, I have to say. I wouldn't say it's overrated though. How do you prioritize what shots needs to be done first for the film, I suppose? Is it chronological? Well, for my own film, I just work on the shots that seems most fun for me at the moment. That keeps me most inspired. How much time did it take to make your last video, including the YouTube editing? It normally takes a few days to make one of these. Some videos are quicker than others. Obviously the creation of the shot itself takes some time, but then figuring out how to share it with you guys in an interesting way takes a lot of brain power too. Making sure to record most of the process is actually a bit frustrating sometimes. But at the same time, when I do hit the record button, I feel like I better get on with it. So it can be a good thing to sort of force me to work as well. Was there a moment when you realized this is what you want to do? It's been a pretty gradual process, but during my maybe during my university studies, I really understood that this is a field which I could actually make a living from. I mean, I fell in love with filmmaking during my teenage year. So it was something I knew I wanted to continue with, whether or not it was my profession or not. Luckily, the world has some need for this stuff. Alright, I think this was a good amount of questions to end on here. This car will need some further work, and I want to animate lights and reflections moving over it as it drives. It obviously will have a driver and a steering wheel in the end, but as those things will be animated, I sort of group those as one for now. I will also need to figure out how to animate the background so it feels like it's driving on a road. Stay tuned for upcoming videos and feel free to subscribe to this channel. You can also support me on Patreon if you fancy that. Alright, bye.